Grover?
Sure. This is a very important piece of legislation. It's also part of a broader movement across the country the last several years, transparency in general. Governor Rick Perry, 2007, started posting all the expenditures of the governor's office, and then Combs, the comptroller of the state, started doing it for the rest of the state. Now 25 states, either by executive order or through legislation, do this at the state level and post every check the state writes, the contracts that the state enters into. 2 states, Florida and Utah, now require it of local governments as well, all political subdivisions. And every time we face this in a state, the opponents of transparency overstated the costs. And every time they posited problems that didn't happen. And the people who most objected to transparency had the most to hide. I think we're seeing that again with this legislation. People look at it and say, this makes obvious sense. Clearly, people who lend the money ought to know what the obligations are. Most importantly, government workers themselves, whose retirement depends on somebody actually investing for their future. They have the right, ought to have the right to know the status of their pensions. And I worry that if somebody comes up and says, oh, this would be a bad idea, what is it that that person doesn't want? What is it they know that they don't want you to know? So this is not only an important legislation, it's really like Solomon's judgment on the 2 women and the 1 baby. It really tells you who's where and what people think is happening when they react, if they react negatively to such common sense legislation.
I'm Tom Schatz, President of the Council for Citizens Against Government Waste, and we're pleased to endorse this legislation. It's the next step in transparency. We've seen this throughout the government. The Federal Accountability and Transparency Act puts grants and contracts online. People can see where their money is going. On the back end of that, the earmark process was exposed several years ago with lists of earmarks in the back of appropriations bills. When we did our first Congressional Pig Book in 1991, none of that information was available. It's not just a matter of having it, it's a matter of getting it out to the American people. There are many outlets available that were not available 10 years ago, the Internet, of course, and people need to know everything that's going on with their money. This is one area where they really don't understand what's happening. There are debates here in Washington, what's the true size of the national debt? It could be 14 trillion, some say it's 150 trillion. There could be more transparency here as well. But this is something that is simple. It's not making demands that the states can't meet. It won't be expensive. The information already exists. It's a matter of pushing a button, sending it to the Treasury, and getting the information out so people know what's going on in the pension area. Thank you.
I'm Pete Sepp, Executive VP for National Taxpayers Union. It was Barack Obama himself, when he was a senator sponsoring the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, who said there's no legitimate argument against transparency. We can only hope that will be the case as this legislation advances through Congress. After all, when you consider the burdens that federal, state, and local governments have imposed on the private sector for financial industry reporting, for mutual funds, what have you, this seems to be a truly minor burden, not even a burden, not even an imposition. All this bill is asking is for states to present an alternative method of the financial condition of their pension plans. That's hardly an imposition. It pales in comparison to the kinds of burdens that have been imposed on our private sector. If state and local governments can't do this, then as Grover said, taxpayers have great reason to worry. That's why National Taxpayers Union is proud to sponsor this legislation and support this legislation. And as an alternative to the proposals that President Obama is floating now to give states incentives to raise unemployment taxes or perhaps create another bailout situation under whatever guise, this is the legislation that needs to come first and foremost before any other discussions about the federal government's role in state and local financial problems. So let's get it done. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Larry Hart, Director of Government Relations for the American Conservative Union. And, you know, there is nothing government likes to do better than to kick the can down the road. And there's a can labeled public pension reform that's about to hit up against a sign that says dead end. And it's funny because I just got an email this morning that a statement that Governor Christie made in New Jersey just this week, blasting the New Jersey State Legislature for doing nothing to reform public pensions in the civil service. So the new governors know that are just starting out that this is a crisis that is in the near future, and it's to Congressman Nunes, Chairman Issa, Chairman Ryan, and the senators here today credit that they're willing to take this issue on that is not an imminent crisis yet and try to do something about it. And transparency is the first step that you have to do in order to see where things are. Otherwise, if you wait, you wind up with the bank bailout, the auto bailout, and the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac bailout. And that's the last thing the American taxpayer wants. So congratulations, and we're delighted to support this effort.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm Randy Johnson. I'm Senior Vice President at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. First of all, I want to express the strong support of the U.S. Chamber for the legislation. You might ask, and certainly some unions have asked, well, what's the interest of the U.S. Chamber in this legislation? It affects the public sector, the members of the Chamber, our private sector workers, private sector employers. Why do you guys care? Well, I'll tell you why we care, and it took us a while to kind of focus on this longer than we should have. Eventually, one of the solutions that's going to come to the table is increased taxes, no surprise, on our members and the private sector workers that work for our companies. So this is an issue that eventually is going to, I think, split the public sector unions from the private sector unions. But who knows? It depends on the solutions that will be eventually arrived at, hopefully by the public sectors as they kind of muddle through this mess that they've created. But the point here is this legislation, the beauty is in its simplicity. Let's get the facts on the table and figure out what possible solutions might be useful that don't eventually result in greater taxation on my members. That's the interest of my membership. I can tell you we're strong supporters of this, and we're going to do everything we can to get it passed. The House, hopefully we can move it. The Senate will be a greater challenge. You know, Scarlett O'Hara said tomorrow's another day. Well, that's what the public sector said for too many times. Tomorrow's another day. And eventually we'll promise benefits today and we'll worry about how to pay for them tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. Well, now the chickens have come home to roost. This is a problem across the board, frankly, both in the public and the public sector and in the federal government. But it's an important issue to the private sector, and we're not going to lose sight of it. So thank you for introducing the legislation. We're going to be right behind you on this. Thank you.
I'm Jim MacDougald with the Free Enterprise Nation. No one should be more interested in this bill than public sector employees. If you live in Pritchard, Alabama, and were a public sector employee and retired, your pension check stopped 2 years ago. You haven't gotten a check in the last 2 years. Your pension was guaranteed by the state of Alabama, but you haven't been paid. The cities of Vallejo, California went bankrupt. The first question asked was, will the pensioners get your pension checks? Will those who are about to retire get their pension checks? Bottom line is, even today, they can only say, we think they will. If you're a public sector employee and you work your entire career around a promise that you will receive a benefit, you deserve to know that those promises are going to be funded for and that they will be kept. Right now, there is huge question existing in our country as to whether or not some entities, states, cities, counties, and school boards can keep their promises. Outside experts have pointed out some, they're on this list, that they say will go right off a cliff in anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 8 years. There will literally be no money. Now, you can guarantee to pay people, but when you have no money, you can't pay it. So in addition to private sector taxpayers, public sector employees need to know the answers to these questions. And most importantly, those officials that we elect to monitor these things, to govern these things, need to know the information themselves. They're getting information that isn't accurate. It isn't a fair portrayal of what's going on. And for them to do their jobs, they have to have consistent and uniform regulations, the same regulations that they require of the private sector. All we're asking is that you play by the same rules that you require the private sector to play by. We're very strongly in support of this legislation, support the Senate and House members who have brought it forward. It is long past due. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Steve Woods. I'm the Vice President of State Policy for NFIB, and I think I'm the last one speaking. You've heard from a lot of people. So let me just add our support for the pension transparency bill and thank Congressman Nunes and the other members for their leadership on this issue. We think it's an effort to get a true accounting of the pension liabilities that are out there in the 50 states and in the many municipalities. The first step in filling in a hole is to decide how deep it is. So we think this is an important first step. Whether you believe the pension liabilities are $1 trillion or $3 trillion, it's a serious burden on taxpayers today and going into the future. I know that our lobbyists at the state level are working with a number of governors and legislatures to look at the level of benefits that they've promised over the years, that many people, even editorial boards, are coming out and saying these are benefit levels that are unsustainable. We're supporting efforts to raise the retirement age in state pensions, to increase employee contributions, to move to a defined benefit or defined contribution plan, and in some cases to reduce cost of living increases. Why is this important? Well, as many have said before, it's important to the public employees so that they know they'll have a pension when they retire. Governor Christie has challenged them to consider some of the reforms that he's proposing and to think about whether or not it might be in their best interest to look at some reforms so that there are pensions there when they actually retire.